Hey guys, before we get into today's podcast, I just want to kind of fill you in on a little bit. This was recorded at our second annual Hometown Haunts and Hops horror convention located at Mayflower Brewery. And I'm not in this episode. I'm taking today off. Not really. But so this one is actually the director's panel from the event. And it features director Chris LaMartina. Sorry if I got that. I'm sure I didn't get that right. And John Campopiano. Chris directed WNUF, the Halloween special, as well as the sequel. And John directed Pennywise, the story of It, which is an award-winning documentary about the making of the original It miniseries on TV. They're both great flicks and phenomenal guys. They're fantastic. I got to meet both of them at the convention, and I had a really great time. But this one is actually hosted by Mike Walsh of Hometown Haunts and I got that wrong, of America's Hometown Horror. So Mike helped organize the entire event with me, and when we were figuring out panels, we didn't want to be on panels all day, so I did the authors one, he did this one, but we still figured we'd put it out for you guys so you guys could kind of like meet Chris and John and hear their stories. And I'm going to be like, this is completely inside baseball. I haven't even heard this yet. So I'm recording this, and when the episode comes out tomorrow, it's going to be the first time I've heard the panel. But I'm sure it will be great, and I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. So let's both sit back and check it out.
All right, we're good here. All right, guys, thanks so much for your patience. Sorry for starting a little bit late here. Guys, welcome to Hometown Haunts and Hops 2024. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thanks so much for being here. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. It means a whole hell of a lot to us. So my name is Mike. I'm joined here by my friend Matthew. Him and I co-host a podcast with our friends Andrew and my wife Catherine called America's Hometown Horror. We do that once a week. Kind of jack of all trades horror podcast. And we work with Inebri-art to put together this awesome event. And we're excited to be back for year two. One of the biggest things that we added for this year for the first time was the Hometown Haunts and Hops Horror Film Festival, which kicked off last night. And Matthew, we happen to be joined by the two directors of the films that were screened last night at the Hometown Haunts and Hops Film Festival. Isn't that right?
Sure are.
Guys, let's give a very warm welcome to directors Chris LaMartina and John Campopiano. Guys, give them a round of applause.
Thanks for having us, y'all.
Thanks, guys.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Plymouth.
Oh, yeah. It's exciting to be here.
I know. So, Chris, first time in Plymouth for you, right?
Correct. Yeah, I've been to Massachusetts plenty of times, but yeah, not Plymouth proper.
Okay.
I'm ready to rock. So I've been waiting my entire life to say that.
I thought for sure you might save that one for the after party
Yeah,
tonight.
that's true. We're definitely going to rock at the after party.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, I know as a Rhode Islander, you've probably been to Plymouth a few times before, right?
Oh, yeah, I came here a lot as a kid. Spent a lot of time here.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we're happy to have you guys. You guys having a good time today or what?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah,
We're having a
great
fantastic time.
Awesome. I mean, lucky to be joined by you guys. And, of course, we have John Cassier downstairs, which you guys get to hang out
he's
next to
sitting
him
next to
all
us.
day.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Another Baltimore guy, actually.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting for me.
It's pretty funny. So when we were downstairs getting set up before, and I feel like the room kind of just went silent when John walked in. Everybody was like, "Oh, John's here. The Crypt Keeper's here. Holy shit!" And he walked in, and we introduced ourselves to him. And Matt was just kind of like, It's funny. Kat, our co-host, looked at Matt, and she was like, "Wow, Matt, you look like you were glowing when you got introduced to John Cassier."
I was starstruck a little bit, so it was not. I was just like, I'm a really big fan.
So, guys, obviously, you guys are here. We're doing a horror director panel. You guys are both filmmakers that have made a number of films that I thoroughly enjoy, and I know Matt does as well, and obviously everybody here in our audience. Chris, you're perhaps best known for the WNUF Halloween special, which we screened last night at Dirty Water Distillery. Give it up for WNUF Halloween special.
Oh yeah.
Appreciate it.
And of course, John, you directed Pennywise, The Story of It, which won the 2023 Fangoria Chainsaw Award for Best Documentary. Give it up for John and Pennywise. That's incredible. So, amongst many other films, I should say. Totally not nervous at all or rambling, forgive me. So, anyway.
You're doing great, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. So, guys, I guess, talk to me about, why do you like making films about spooky stuff, films about horror. What do you like about it? What draws you to it?
Am I going? Who's going first?
You want to go first? Rock, paper?
Yeah. Okay. Ready?
Round of one?
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay.
I'll go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Well, it started for me as like therapy. So I was like tormented by horror films as a kid. Loved them. But when I did the Pet Cemetery doc, my filmmaker partner and I, Justin, we went up to Maine to see the filming locations. And it was kind of like a cathartic experience of like, okay, let's like step into the places where these films were made and kind of like come to peace with them in some way, you know, like just like wanted to know everything we could about them. And then meeting the cast and crew, I just got bit by the bug and just loved the experience of like digging into films and finding photos and stuff that nobody had ever seen before, fellow fans of this stuff. And it was like kind of like an experience. It was like a cathartic experience of like digging into these things and learning about them, meeting people like Zelda, you know, with Pet, and kind of just like, I don't know, closing a chapter on my childhood. And since then, it's just been, you know, I've just loved making stuff.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
I grew up loving horror movies. I mean, I was the youngest of three kids. I remember poking over my brother's shoulder. We would watch stuff like Monster Squad or Predator. And I think the idea of something being forbidden to me at that age was very fascinating, that allure of things I shouldn't be doing. And that was really excited me to love horror movies. And then I guess like most filmmakers, I found the family camcorder when I was like 12 years old, started making stop motion shorts, started suckering all the kids in my neighborhood to being like, you know, victims in all these monster movies. And every year they got more elaborate. And I think at first, the evolution of storytelling, like from a filmmaking standpoint, was like the magic trick allure of it, right? Like, oh, let's see if we can make it look like somebody's head got chopped off, right? And that, like, okay, that looks totally not believable at all, but it was fun, and we like did a thing, right? And I think as I got older, the idea of actually telling a story with like character arcs or like more transformative storytelling, or even tying in like themes of like sociopolitical things into the idea of a larger narrative, that's what kept me wanting to make movies. It was no longer just the function of doing that sort of illusion antic, but to do something that's a little bit more culturally relevant. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Matt. Yep.
Now I'll say, because you guys are two very different kinds of filmmakers. John, very strictly documentary style.
Yeah.
And then you have more, you go into the fictional, or even like kind of like the pseudo setup, like with WNUF and everything like that. Can we talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each one of those things? Like what you find to be the most enjoyable and the most, what you get the most out of, and then the things that are definitely the most difficult as well.
Okay, pros and cons. I'll take this one first since you did
Sure.
it. Yeah, go. Sure. Okay, so I will say, so I started in like traditional narrative features before WNUF. WNUF has obviously got a found footage vibe to it. If folks are familiar with it, if aren't familiar with it, it's like if somebody taped local television on Halloween night, 1987. So fake commercials every 7 minutes. It really feels like you taped a TV show off of like a local TV station back then. So before that, I made a handful of movies before and after WNUF that were more traditional narratives. And I think the toughest part about making those movies on a low budget specifically, and I think there's different things. There's definitely challenges when the budget gets bigger, right? The more rounds of revisions or opinions you have to listen to. Like my wife just directed a movie for a little studio that I wrote and co-produced with her. Let me say this carefully. Sometimes you have to listen to opinions that you don't necessarily agree with, but like that's part of the process, and that was interesting. Whereas like a low budget movie, you're more in the driver's seat and you get to make all those decisions, but you have less resources. So like you're not paying people, and when you're not paying people, or you're paying people so low, it's like you might as well not be paying people, right? Like they could literally probably, you know, run a lemonade stand and make more money than what you're paying them. So I think that's the thing that is the most challenging about it. So that's the con, right? Like trying to figure out how to make, like, you know, how do you make like a cult church look good when you have a location budget of $1,000, right? Like how do you make like a giant tentacle monster when when you have limited resources? But the pro is you're in the driver's seat. You're making artistic decisions that ultimately like the only limit is your imagination and your the dollar amount. So, yeah.
I mean, for me, I would say with docs, like the pro is the excitement of not knowing what you're going to find. Mm-hmm. So, you're like, I always liken docs to like archaeology. Like there's a story in there and you sort of have to like go in and find it and uncover it, which to me is really exciting because you may start a project and have a general blueprint of where it's headed. And then it pivots like halfway through. You're like, holy shit, like I didn't see that coming, or the story just changes. So that's cool. At the same time, when you're doing like narrative stuff, it's a clean slate. You're like, okay, what is the story going to be? Where are these characters going to go? Where do I want them to go? And you have the freedom to do that. Whereas with docs, if you're doing it right and you want to, do the story right, you have to go where the story's going, even if it's maybe not where you want it to go. You know, you just have to follow it through. So you're kind of held to that. You're restricted in a way.
Yep.
And that's come up a couple of times for me where it's like, oh, this is not what I was anticipating. And I can't just like write it a different way.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, it's history. Yeah.
So, John, I have to ask you because I know we were talking downstairs beforehand a little while ago. So not only did you direct Pennywise, but you also directed a movie called Snapper, the man-eating turtle movie that never got made, which is just, I mean, what an awesome concept for a movie in general.
Yeah.
What was it like to make a documentary about a movie that actually never got made?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that I find interesting about docs is like, okay, you may have a story. It's like, okay, this is going to be about a turtle movie that never got made, but there's got to be a story within the story. And as I got to know the two filmmakers that tried to make that movie in Worcester back in the 90s, I quickly realized, I mean, we interviewed them together, their chemistry was just obvious. And it was like, okay, these guys are the story. You know, so you're telling the story of a film that failed through the lens of these two creatives that have been trying to make stuff for decades. And it was almost became like a buddy story as opposed to just like a doc about a failed movie. And so that's kind of how that came to be. That's what sort of drove my interest with that. And I try to find that in all the docs. You know, it's harder with some. If you're doing a doc about a making of a film, it's, you know, you may find some of that in there, but ultimately you're telling the production history of something, and that's the story. But with something like Snapper, I had freedom to kind of go into weird directions with it.
That's awesome. So almost like started as one thing and became another as you went down.
Like I was saying
that.
before, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Really cool. And I would say, Chris, wanted to ask you a little bit about WNUF. Obviously, you know, we talked a little bit last night at the screening, but did you ever think that WNUF would have the cult status that it has to this day when you were shooting it, when you were making it? It's kind of incredible how it's taken off.
No, so, and I'll do a little bit longer of an answer than I gave last night, and I think I was feeling a little bit good when we talked last night, so I might have been goofy. But what I'll say is, like, when we made WNUF, so it's funny, for a while we were making about a movie a year, right? Every summer we would get together and make a movie, and by, like, hopefully I'd be editing by the fall, and it would, you know, premiere next October, that type of vibe. We were coming up on the first year where we hadn't made a movie, and I was like, well, we should try to figure out how to make like a found footage movie, because we can make a found footage movie quickly, right? And then of course became the most like ass backwards way of making a found footage movie, because it actually became way more complicated with like making all these fake commercials, like, you know, shooting all this vintage gear, making it look like the 80s. So like making a period piece for a found footage movie already complicated it. But the whole time we were making it, the reason why I was excited about it was because it was doing something so counteractive to what a lot of our contemporaries were doing, right? Like, I tried to make the point, maybe I didn't articulate well enough last night, like, all our friends from film school at the time were like bragging about the type of camera package they were using, right? Like this new red camera that came out that shot 4K and was amazing for color grading and all this stuff. And we were like the dipshits, we're like, yeah, we're shooting on VHS cameras, like we're gonna make this thing that just looks like asshole. But I was so excited about it the whole time we were making it that, like, and I told Jimmy, my producer, writing partner at the time, like, no one's gonna like this movie, but we're gonna make it anyway because we're really passionate about it. It's like a love letter to, like, I mean, at the time I was a couple years removed from working at a government TV station. Halloween was like, every day was Halloween to me, and I feel like there was this really interesting moment where you pour so much passion into something that, like, you're stoked about it the whole time, but you don't necessarily know if you'll find the audience that's as passionate about it as you are. And it's the magic of it is when we released it, we first released it on VHS only for the first 3 months. So if somebody had to buy it, they had to buy a fucking VHS version, which was really bizarre for a lot of people at the time. This is way before the VHS thing sort of came in vogue in the last like 5-10 years, because it's like 15 years ago now. But like, it was crazy, like having people react to it at the time and talk about it like, oh yeah, this is a movie I watch every Halloween. Like, if you pour passion into something, if you truly just have this like, I'm doing this because I love this and I love this part of the process like so much, that joy of creativity will transcend, and you'll find the audience that these movies are made for. And that's the biggest point, was like, just as long as, if you're doing something for a dollar sign, I think people know. If people know if it's just like a paid gig, they'll realize that very quickly. But if you are like, I'm so fucking like stoked about the movie I'm making, it'll find the people it's for.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know I said this to you last night, but it's just one of those films, like the first time I turned it on, I could tell that I was watching a movie made by somebody that I feel like I could really relate with, and how much I love Halloween and the type of stuff that I love, like growing up, that like lo-fi 80s, 90s aesthetic, which I really dug a lot. So,
Thank you.
And it's become a yearly rewatch for me, as I know it has for a lot of people.
That's cool.
I thought it was really cool that It kind of came up in conversation again this year because obviously with the success of Late Night with the Devil, another fantastic movie. A lot of people were saying that that's a really good double feature to pair with your movie or a movie like Ghost Watch. So it's happy to see you get the WNUF get the bump with that movie being released.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off what you were talking about. So having this where you basically dove in, this is a passion project. You were just deciding, we're doing this is what I love, this is what I want to do. Where did the inspiration come from? What was the idea that you were like, I want to do this, where it's something so like niche and specific?
Yeah.
Like where did the inspiration come from? What were the things growing up that you were like trying to reach back to?
So it was really interesting to talk about like my brother. So something else of three, I'm an accident. And basically, I mean, it's like true. Literally, my mom has told me this. It's really bizarre. I love my mom. She's great. It's just like she thinks that's funny. So, so like I grew up like having those VHS tapes that my brother would tape off TV, and like one of the things with WNF specifically was that the first half hour of the movie is the news, right, and then it goes into the special. But I had tapes. I had this one beloved tape. It was a copy of. It starts with the Michael Caine miniseries of Jack the Ripper. Which probably nobody. Well, thank you. Like you're probably like one of like 10 people that know that. But like, yeah, is it okay? All right, we'll look it up tonight, guys. So and then it went to a version of Evening Magazine, which was like a news story where they talked about, and this actually totally transformed into what we did with the sequel, where they talked about Orson Welles doing War of the Worlds. And it was like a news story about that, like 70 years after the fact or whatever the math was for 1987. And then it was Monster Squad. Monster Squad was one of my favorite movies. So the idea of like those, I watched that tape all the time. But it was, those things didn't exist together, right? Like that wasn't like the movie, but like I thought about that when we were making WNF. So that was like one of the parts. But I'm gonna try to tell this very, very fast because like it's a lot. So we want to make a found footage movie, but like there was like a list of things with found footage movies that I hated, right? And I think what I ended up doing was like writing a list of all the things I hated about found footage movies and also paired into some Baltimore folklore, or not folklore, history. So really, really quickly, found footage movies. When messed up things start happening, people keep filming. Isn't that obnoxious when you turn your camera off and react to messed up things? So that was one thing. You go to a video store and you find a DVD with the UPC code on it. Clearly people didn't die in this movie because there's a UPC code. They're selling it. They wouldn't fucking do that if it's real. Third thing is found footage movies because they're like they feel very like a couple people, one location. It ends up being this whole thing where it's like it just like it's monotonous to me. I don't really enjoy a lot of found footage that way. I also have a terrible attention span. I talk really fast. I obviously have ADHD. But the thing there was I wrote these things down on a list, and I was like, okay, why are they still filming? Well, maybe they're still filming because they have to keep filming. Maybe there's economics compared to this, right? Like maybe if they don't cut, like there's advertising revenue. So like the idea of a TV broadcast immediately went into it. 2, the UPC code. Well, if we first released the movie on VHS. And just literally the first 300 copies of this movie was just a black VHS tape with a white spine label that just says WNF Halloween Special. It's not even fucking box art. Like, it's bizarre. Now, subsequently, we had to actually market it like a real movie, but that was how that first came out. And then third, the monotony. If it was a TV broadcast, you would be able to break it up by quite literal commercial breaks. So like, and that totally ties into the economics of the conceit of the story. Why are they filming this? Because there's advertising revenue. This is capitalism, baby. So basically, like it all tied in together in that way. And that is how the movie started. But the big Baltimore history there was that really was the starting point was Edgar Allan Poe's house is in Baltimore. And I'm a huge like spoken word, Halloween novelty record nerd. I love collecting that stuff. And there was a radio show done from the Edgar Allan Poe house where they did a live seance on the radio back in the 70s. I'd heard about this. It was on the Edgar Allan Poe's house website. I had never been able to find a copy. I contacted them if they found a copy. And they, of course, they said no, it was only on the radio. And I never was able to find a copy, but that was the starting point. Like a televised seance would be really cool. Ghostwatch comes up a lot because people think I saw Ghostwatch, but honestly, I'll tell you, if I ripped off anything, I subconsciously ripped off to give John Kassir some love, the Tales from the Crypt episode, Television Terror. That is way more my influence there.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, that's fair.
Awesome, good stuff. Yeah. John, I wanted to ask you because as a lover of cryptids, when we came to get talking to you, saw that you're making a movie called Sasqua, about the lost Bigfoot film from Massachusetts, and I absolutely love cryptid stuff. So I know that's in post-production right now?
Yeah, we're in post-production. That'll be out next year.
Okay,
So
awesome.
Basically, back in the early 70s, a bunch of filmmakers out of Lowell, Massachusetts made a Bigfoot horror film. They shot it on 35 millimeter. It was grassroots DIY filmmaking at its truest. Took 3 years to make it. They got it into drive-ins and theaters in Massachusetts the summer that Jaws came out, tough competition. And it played around the country. And then by 78 or thereabouts, it completely vanished. It never had any kind of release. No VHS, nobody has seen it since. And so this documentary, we found all the people that are still around that worked on the film and tell the story of Sasquatch and what happened to it. So that'll be out next year in time for the 50th anniversary of when it hit.
Is that a victim of like destroyed footage?
It'll be out next year and you can check it.
I do want to ask you though. So you have obviously we watched Pennywise, the story of it last night. It was fantastic.
Thanks.
Absolutely fantastic. And then I have seen your Pet Cemetery documentary, which is also fantastic. So clearly a Stephen King fan.
Yeah.
You read both novels, I imagine, as well.
Yep, too young.
Yep.
A lot of us.
Any other Stephen King stories that you're kind of thinking of maybe gravitating towards, if you're willing to talk about?
No, I'm kind of done with Steven for now.
Okay.
Happy birthday to him, by the way, today.
Happy birthday.
No, I've sort of, and not because I'm like adverse to it, just that those are the projects that kind of, yeah. So we're working on other stuff.
Okay, cool.
Ever met him?
Never met him.
Okay. All right.
Never met him.
Interesting.
No. Emailed, but never met him in the flesh.
Still cool. I mean, getting an
I'll
email
take it.
from Stephen
Yeah.
King. Gotta
It might
pretty
be on the
awesome,
fridge,
right?
it might not be. But
Yeah. Cool. All right. Matt, unless you have anything else, I feel like it would probably be fair to take some questions from the audience. If you guys have some questions for John and Chris, sure, right up front. Actually, you know what? If you want to come up, we have a microphone that we can, just so we can get it on recording, or I can bring it to you, whatever you want to do. Don't be shy. Everybody's friendly here. What's your name?
Should I pick it up?
Sure. Or you can pick it up.
I'm Chris.
Hi,
John's
Chris.
been on my show. So I have a question for John about Sasquatch. When you hear about something like this, how do you begin your process to hunt down the information? Like, I'm doing a documentary right now, and thankfully, I'm not flying all over the planet Earth interviewing people. I'm just literally calling people up and being like, you knew the dead? Let's talk about the dead. And that's how we do the process. Explain how you find out about like the snapper and Sasquatch and how that happens. Because I know everything about Pennywise and the other one. So,
I mean, I like to sort of just like hit the pavement and start talking to people. So with Sasquatch, we knew it was made in Lowell. So like I'm getting on like Facebook pages like, you were born in Lowell when, which has like 30,000 members. And I'm just like casting out messages to people. Or I'm like, looking up the credits to the film and I'm like looking up people to see if they're still around. Or I'm trying to find relatives of people that share the same last name from that area. And I'm cold calling them like, hey, is this a relative of yours? And like it can lead me, and it has led us down some really cool paths to finding people and other things. So
because I'm listening to a podcast right now, and they're trying to find out information about a contest that was run in 1999. And they're literally throwing it in every single group saying, does anyone know about this contest? Because Jim Lee, the artist, DC comic artist, doesn't have any more information beyond like, I was just like, here's the thing, guys. And they're trying to find out what happened to the product that was in the contest as it was.
yeah, I just, you got to think outside the box with that stuff. Like I'm always calling historical societies. I'm calling places like UMass Lowell, like get me in touch with the Center for Lowell History, like people that are like archivally minded, historically minded, people that are like invested in the community that might have connections or might know someone that knows someone. You hit a lot of dead ends. I mean, 7 times out of 10, it's like, sorry, I can't help you. But like those 3 times you get a hit can turn into 10 hits and then just suddenly boom, so.
I have a question about that though. The movie's called Sasquatch.
Sasquatch.
Is that like the plural of Sasquatch? Like why?
That's what they were going for. I'll leave it there.
Okay. All right. I like that. Yeah.
I've been known to mispronounce some things from time to time. That's okay.
He has a speech impediment. Yeah, no. It's Sasquatch. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Cool. Anyone else have any questions? Questions from the audience, guys?
Somebody ask a question, otherwise I'll ask another one.
Feel free. Ask another one. Sure. Come on up. Hi. What's your name?
Quinn.
Hi, Quinn.
This is for Chris. Something that I really appreciate about both WNUF and the Out There Halloween Megatape. I was curious in how you format your scripts because, like, you have like the natural progression from the specials into the commercial breaks, but yet the commercial breaks also act as like this 3-way gags, social commentary, but also like little bits of storytelling if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Like in how in WNUF you have all the political ads with
Yeah.
Robert Dandridge, and then a decade later he's still running for office. So yeah, I was wondering how you kind of like pace that out.
That's fabulous. That's a fabulous question, Quinn. Thank you so much, and thank you for being able to articulate like just like that nature that usually I can't. So, so it's funny. The scripts for the WNF movies. I mean, there's there sometimes the actors improvise stuff, but they are scripted out completely. And the initial part is all the story segments are totally scripted like a normal formatted script, right? The commercials, however, so this is how I think the process ends up being like a little bit more organic. I write all the commercials as if they're their own separate things, and they're not in the actual feature script. So in Out There, that's the most fresh in my mind, so I'll talk about Out There. I wrote probably another 20 commercials that weren't even produced, right? That I was just sort of like, what's actually realistic? So I knew what I wanted to make, but then I don't decide where the commercials are going to go in the movie until like I'm editing and I'm like, okay, after this scene played a little darker or a little funnier. Let's try to like offset the. It's always about like a real weird tonal shift. Like I'm going to put like a weird like AIDS PSA after like being really goofy, right? Or like so like to sort of like fuck with the audience's tone just a tiny bit, right? Or that sense of place. Or for example, in WF, like it was a very strategic decision. Spoilers: after the cat is found dead. Sorry, I love cats, guys. It's just that's how you the audience. We put the pet store ad after that. You know, after you haven't seen the burgers for a little bit in WF, that's when we put the commercial for their book. So things like that. But the other thing that's interesting too, I think, like your question to bring out with Dandridge and what is it? Just the idea that he's like. You know, the sequel takes place in the 90s, the original takes place in 87. I was really fascinated with the idea, and the reason why the sequel even came about was because I was like, now there's 90s nostalgia, right? At the time we were thinking about making a sequel, I was like, could the 90s nostalgia really exist? Because it hadn't hit yet. And I was trying to think about how my relationship with the 90s actually being more cognizant of that, growing up more in the 90s. I was born in 85, versus like seeing VHS tapes that my brother and my sister had taped. I was like, okay, well, the idea of making a sequel, but almost as if the 90s as sequel to the 80s, right? Like, what does that mean for people like, you know, case in point, like there are people that are governor in the 80s that end up running president in the 90s, like a Bill Clinton, or there are people that were businessmen in the 80s that are now, you know, like former presidents like Trump in 2024, or yeah. So basically, I liked the idea of messing around with that tone and then like hinting at that mythology and really building a landscape of story, like in a way that made it feel like very regional and very local. Like I wanted people to see their own communities in a movie, you know, because I thought that was so important to the overall mythology of the story. So that's how ends up being very organic. Thank you. That's a great question. Appreciate that.
Have you seen the Groove Tube?
I have not seen the Groove Tube, but I see the artwork. It's the gorilla with the. You
gotta watch the.
All right, I'll watch the Groove Tube. By the way, I feel like I've met like a kindred spirit today. Like John, I feel like we never interacted in person. I'm like, God, we're like, let's party later. Yeah.
Yes, I did have a question. This is for any of the filmmakers, both of you. Sorry. When did you want to give up? Don't say it didn't happen, because I know it happens to every filmmaker. George Lucas wanted to give up on Star Wars like a dozen times.
That's a good question.
I know exactly what I'm going to.
I'm sorry if it's so depressing.
No, it's not. I might tear up, but that's okay. That's good. It's a good cathartic thing.
I feel like filmmakers that I'm dealing with stories that deal with death.
So I will.
People don't want to talk about it.
No, this is good. So I think the most important thing for me is to realize, and I'll try to articulate this fast, but it is a really important moment in my life. It is. You make very little money doing this stuff, right? Like, and I think that's like not why we do it. We don't. I know. Have you checked your bank like the last 20 years? But anyway, so that's not why we do it. But there's days where you're like, I mean, in 2010, I was like, I was working at the mayor's office in Baltimore. I was one of the inspirations for WF, and our office was going to gut people, and I volunteered myself. I was like, let me lose my job. I want to move to Los Angeles, and I want to go pursue a career in filmmaking. And subsequently, I think that was the best decision that I did not do that, because I think it transformed the idea to make movies not when I have to pay my rent or pay my mortgage, I should say, but like because I make movies only when I want to make them. And I think making art when you want to make it is way more impactful than doing something as a for hire gun, whenever, right? I mean, I can, pay my mortgage with working for a corporation. But in that time period, I'd lost my job. I'd been laid off, chose to be laid off, which is a really stupid thing. And the moment that hit the worst was I was living with my then girlfriend at the time. I realized I was losing my health insurance. I'm a type 1 diabetic. And I realized how bad the Cobra insurance payments were going to be. And I was like, holy fuck, dude, I can't, I'm not going to be able to pay rent. I'm going to have to move back in with my folks. My folks were babysitting my sister's kids at the time, so I got to move back into my childhood bedroom that now had Spider-Man sheets. It was incredibly emasculating. The first day and this was all while we were finishing up this movie we made called Witch's Brew. And it was this moment where it was, God, it's crazy. So like, we had the first worst day. So Jimmy, my producer, who I love, is one of my best friends still. He booked like 8 pages for the first shoot day. And any filmmaker tell you, make the first shoot day of your movie the lightest day, because it's like you're gonna go get behind. And subsequently, we learned this mistake is not what you do. We were already like 4 pages behind on the first day. I had no money. I've just moved back home. I broke up with my girlfriend at the time, which is way better. I'm glad. But like at the time, I did not feel that. And I remember sitting in a Wendy's with Jimmy, and just sobbing, just being like, dude, like I have to move back home. I have no fucking money. I don't even know if I'm gonna move to Los Angeles, how long this movie's gonna take to finish. I was like so depressed I didn't even finish my Baconator. And and Jimmy said to me, but I'm not gonna leave you in the down point. Jimmy said to me, Chris, like, just give it one more day. Just give it one more fucking day. And the next day, and this is why I think movies are so powerful. You make these movies with mini armies where you, my mom, who's a carpenter, in addition to was a former school principal, she's an amazing woman. She had built this fake, this bathroom set where we had shot this scene where this guy shits his intestines out. And, and so it was played by Paul Fahrenkopf, who's Frank Stewart in WNUF. Just these are my filmmaking family. And there was this shot where he goes to take his, God, this is so repulsive. He goes to take his pants down, and before he could sit down, he just blasts a splatter of shit against the toilet seat everywhere. And I'm telling you, in that moment, fake blood saved my life. Because literally, I jumped up with glee, like that looks so repulsive and disgusting, and it was just this look of pure joy came across his face. I looked across to see Paul, who was very frustrated because he was sweating. It was August, but he was trying to keep a straight face while he's shitting himself. And Jimmy looked so happy, and I looked so happy, and I was like, you know what, dude? At that moment, it was like, I will figure out the life stuff, but right now, this is what matters. And this is like this is the thing you have to focus on. When everything else sucks in your life, you have to focus on the thing that gives you joy and has to motivate you. And I think movies and storytelling has always been that thing that always like pushes me and motivates me to keep going. Storytelling is what I love about the process.
That's another con of dogs.
Yeah.
No explosive diarrhea. I'm missing out.
The night is young, my friend.
I know. I could still pivot careers. I mean, in the spirit of what you said, I mean, making this stuff takes sacrifice. I mean, it just does, especially when you have a full-time job. You know, like for me, giving up, like wanting to give up. I mean, having to like leave the house with a 6-month-old at home with your wife and feeling like a complete asshole and just having to get through that stuff. I mean, I've lost friends to suicide, like deaths in the family. Alex is going to know what I'm saying when I say this. That like, sometimes you crowdfund a project and it's not out fast enough, and you get some real heat from the people you're making it for at the end of the day. That makes you want to give up.
Yeah.
But thankfully you've got like support. Like I've got a wife that's like, no, you need this. Like this makes you a better dad, a better husband. Like you need to exercise that muscle to be here. So you want to give up a lot, but you don't, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and stuff like this is like the big thing, right? Like talking about this with each other and finding kindred spirits is like the best part of the process because you don't feel alone.
Yeah.
The horror community is pretty tight. Yeah. There's a lot of people that, if you're in it, you're in it. You enjoy it. You support all of it. I think it's a cool thing too. So I appreciate you guys. Both those answers are fantastic.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking earlier, and it's of all the things that I thought that I never would have expected for us to come up when we were all chatting earlier, and it does fit. But like horror fans kind of tend to circle back to the same types of things, And growing up as a kid in the 90s in Massachusetts, Spooky World was a huge thing to me. So we got talking about the Spooky World VHS, John, and then Chris, as a kid from Baltimore, I would have never thought that it would have made, had its tendrils that far down. But it's just funny because it's just, we all tend to gravitate towards the same things. And it's just a really cool thing to see and talk about, especially with a potential documentary, or not a potential documentary about Spooky World coming out at some point in the future. Can't wait to see that one. Yep. Shout out to Spooktacular and the Spooktacular team. Love those guys. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. We're getting up against it. We might have time for one more quick question from the audience if anyone has a question that they want to ask John or Chris. Now's the time. Yes. Come on up. All right. Hello there. What's your name?
My name is Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
I guess my question is, how do you define success in one of your movies? Is it, reaching the largest possible audience that you can? I know you talked about when you have more resources, but also sometimes more compromises to do that. So is there what is your definition of making successful art? And do you feel like you've accomplished that?
Free drinks is the big one for me now.
Trying to think of a way to answer that that's not like cliche.
Yeah. No, I think that's where we're gonna go with this.
I mean, I think if I'm proud of it and if I'm excited about it, then that's success. I mean, seeing it through. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned about making docs about films that either don't get made or that are lost or whatever, it's hard to make stuff. I mean, the stuff that you end up seeing on your screen or at the theater is such a small fraction of stuff that people try to make.
Yeah.
So just to get it done is a victory.
Yeah.
And if I'm proud of it, if I feel like I'm adding something to the culture that's not already there, that's not just like a derivative of something else that's been done before, then I'm proud of it. I feel like that's successful.
I was gonna say for sorry, I don't want to cut you off. You're good.
I was gonna say free drinks.
Oh yeah. So it's funny, like I make that as a joke, but it's kind of the truth because like every once in a while I'll be like a horror con or something, so I'll say like, oh yeah, I make movies, and somebody's like, oh, you made anything I've seen? I'm like, I don't know, like I mean, like it kind of depends how hardcore of a horror fan you are, like WWF, like oh my god, like what are you drinking? I'll get you a drink, and like that's a moment where like the cheeky response is I'm an alcoholic, but like the thing is like that's not true, but like the thing I would say is when your work finds an audience, when you are discovered by people that you have no personal connection to, there's like this really special thing, and like I can't stress this enough, like just like literally just dropping a filmmaker even just like a comment on something, or just like sending an email, or like just like even just like a letterbox review saying nice things is like, dude, it's the dark night of the soul making these movies sometimes, where you're like all these hours where you're behind a computer editing something and it feels very lonely. To know that you actually found your audience, that is success, in my opinion. It is the money's nice occasionally when it does come in, but like it's not about that. It's always about like, oh shit, no, like the movies that I grew up loving, like someone had a similar reaction. That's the big thing, just emotional connection.
Totally. I mean, I have docs that like have done better financially that I'm not as proud of. Not that I'm not proud of them, but like I'm not. So it's not. I don't quantify it based on what it's bringing in from a financial standpoint. There's so many other factors that come first.
The passion ones are the ones that count.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I know we're kind of getting up against it here. We have our next show coming in at 4 o'clock. But I want to give a huge thank you to John and Chris for taking the time to come up here and chat with us. Give a big round of applause to John and Chris, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Can honestly say, thrilled to have you guys here, and in dealing with you guys, having you and getting you to come here. Two of the nicest guys you can possibly meet. They're downstairs. Go say hi if you haven't already, and enjoy the rest of Haunts and Hops 2024, guys. Thanks so much. One more thing. Sorry, real quick. The after party tonight will be at Dirty Water Distillery and Chris's band Beach Creeper.
Yeah, surf punk from Baltimore. Come hang out at Dirty Water Distillery.
Absolutely. So enjoy the rest of the day. Come hang with us at the after party. And one more thank you for Chris and John. Guys, awesome to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, man. Thank you.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.